There are moments in life that don't feel important when they're happening. You answer a question. You shake someone's hand. You say one simple word. No. Then years later, you realize that single word quietly changed the course of your entire life. If I had accepted my father-in-law's job offer, I'd probably still be married. Emily would have gotten the country club lifestyle she dreamed about. Her parents would have proudly introduced me as our son-in-law, the executive. We would have lived in the neighborhood they approved of, driven the cars they admired, and attended the charity galas where appearances mattered more than character. From the outside, we would have looked like the perfect American family. But every morning, when I looked in a mirror, I would have seen a man who sold the one thing his father taught him never to bargain away: his integrity. My name is Ethan Brooks, and this is the story of how refusing one job cost me my marriage, and how, 7 years later, the woman who walked away discovered the truth that haunted her for the rest of her life. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. My father wasn't rich. He spent 38 years repairing heavy equipment for the county road department. He came home every evening with grease under his fingernails and a smile that made our little house feel like a mansion. He used to tell me the same thing every birthday. Ethan, people can take your money, your house, even your reputation, but never hand someone your integrity. Once you give it away willingly, it's almost impossible to get back. At 12 years old, I didn't understand what he meant. At 32, those words became the reason my marriage fell apart. I met Emily Harrison at a neighborhood volunteer cleanup. She was beautiful, but not in the way magazine covers define beauty. She had a smile that made strangers feel like old friends. By lunchtime, we'd painted park benches together, shared sandwiches from a food truck, and laughed over how terrible I was with a paintbrush. Before we left, she handed me a napkin with her phone number. I figured if I waited for you to ask, we'd still be standing here next week. She wasn't wrong. I was shy back then. She wasn't. That balance made us work. Or, at least it did for a while. Emily came from a very different world. Her father, Richard Harrison, had built one of the largest commercial construction companies in central Ohio. Their family home sat behind iron gates. They belonged to private clubs. Vacations meant Italy, Aspen, or the Caribbean. My vacations growing up meant fishing with my dad at a lake 20 minutes from home. Neither life was wrong. They were simply different. To Emily, those differences didn't matter. To her parents, they mattered from the very first dinner. Richard shook my hand firmly. So Ethan, what's your long-term plan? I manage operations for a manufacturing company. I didn't ask what you do today. He leaned back. I asked about your future. I smiled politely. I'd like to build something of my own someday. He nodded, but his expression barely changed. I admire ambition. The conversation moved on, but I understood the message. In his eyes, I wasn't successful. I was unfinished. Emily squeezed my hand under the table. Ignore him, she whispered later in the car. He's like that with everyone. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Over the next 4 years, we built a happy life together. Nothing extravagant. We bought a modest brick home with an old maple tree in the front yard. Every Saturday morning, we drank coffee on the porch. Emily loved planting flowers. I loved fixing things around the house. We dreamed about raising children there someday. Money wasn't endless, but it was enough. We laughed often. We argued occasionally. We always found our way back to each other, at least, until success became a competition instead of a blessing. Emily earned a promotion at the marketing firm where she worked. Her salary nearly matched mine. Then she started spending more time at charity dinners and business networking events. Most of the people she met drove luxury cars and wore expensive watches. They talked about investments, vacation homes, and promotions. Slowly, almost without noticing, she started comparing our life to theirs. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she sighed. Look at Melissa and Jason. They just bought a lake house. I smiled. Good for them. She looked at me. Don't you ever want more? I want enough. Her smile faded. Those aren't the same thing. I didn't realize then how much that sentence would matter. A few weeks later, Richard invited me to lunch. just the two of us. He chose the most expensive steakhouse in the city. After the waiter left, he slid a leather folder across the table. "I've been watching you." I frowned. "Okay, my operations director is retiring." I stayed quiet. "You have management experience. I can make you a vice president within 2 years." The salary written inside the folder was almost double what I earned. A company vehicle, bonuses, stock options, everything most people would dream about. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. Richard smiled. "I knew you would." I looked back down at the paperwork. Then I noticed something else. A clause requiring all senior executives to approve financial decisions exactly as directed by ownership. No independent oversight. No authority to challenge internal practices. It seemed unusual. I asked about it. Richard waved his hand dismissively. Standard legal language. Something about his answer didn't sit right with me. I folded the folder closed. "I'd like some time to think." He smiled. But this time, the smile never reached his eyes. I barely slept that night. The salary kept flashing through my mind. It wasn't just a raise. It was enough to pay off our mortgage in less than 5 years. Enough to replace Emily's aging SUV. Enough to finally take the trip to Italy she talked about since our honeymoon. For a few hours, I almost convinced myself I was overthinking it. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe that clause was just legal jargon. Maybe I was letting my pride get in the way of an opportunity. The next morning, I carried the folder into my office and showed it to my boss, Tom Reynolds. Tom had been in manufacturing for over 30 years. He'd seen enough business deals to recognize trouble before most people smelled it. He skimmed the contract in silence. Then he read it again. Finally, he looked up. "Who gave you this?" "My father-in-law." Tom leaned back in his chair. "I can't tell you what to do." "I know, but I can tell you what I do." I waited. I'd walk away. "Because of that clause?" He nodded. "It gives ownership the power to order you to approve financial reports without questioning them." "Is that illegal?" "Not by itself." He tapped the page. "But if those reports ever hide costs, inflate values, or mislead investors, guess whose signature will be sitting underneath?" I stared at the paper. "Mine." Tom nodded slowly. "You become the fall guy." The room suddenly felt much colder. That evening, I sat on the porch with my dad. He didn't say much while I explained everything. When I finished, he took a long sip of coffee. "Do you trust Richard?" I hesitated. "I don't know." My father smiled sadly. "The fact that you hesitated tells me everything." He pointed toward the folder resting on the porch table. "A bad opportunity usually arrives wearing a good suit." I laughed despite myself. "You always have sayings. They're cheaper than therapy." Then his face turned serious. "Ethan, yeah. If you take that job because you believe in it." He shrugged. "Take it. But if you take it because you're afraid someone won't respect you otherwise." He looked me straight in the eye. "You've already lost." 2 days later, I called Richard. "I've made my decision. I assume you've come to your senses." "I'm declining." Silence. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, "Would you care to explain?" "I like where I work." "Don't insult my intelligence." "I'm not." His voice hardened. "My daughter deserves security." "She has security." "No." He practically spat the word. "She has potential." Then he hung up. Emily came home an hour later. She looked unusually excited. "So?" I knew immediately. She already believed I'd accepted. "What did your dad tell you?" "He said you were calling today." I took a slow breath. I turned it down. The smile disappeared from her face. "You what?" I declined. She stared at me as though I'd spoken another language. "Why?" I wasn't comfortable with the contract. "Ethan, you haven't even read it." "I don't need to." "I do." She crossed her arms. "This would have changed our lives." "I know. So why would you say no?" I walked into the kitchen, retrieved the folder, and opened it. "Look here." She barely glanced at the page. "I don't understand legal contracts." "I had someone else review it." "My father isn't trying to scam you." "I didn't say he was." "Then what are you saying?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm saying I won't sign something I don't fully trust." She laughed. Not because it was funny. Because she couldn't believe what she was hearing. So your pride is worth more than our future. My integrity is. They're not the same thing. They are to me. That was the first night we ever went to bed without saying goodnight. The following Sunday, we had dinner at her parents' house. Richard greeted everyone warmly, except me. Throughout dinner, he spoke about business, investments, promotions. Everyone joined the conversation. Everyone except me. Finally, Emily's mother smiled politely. So Ethan. Yes. Richard tells us you've decided to stay exactly where you are. I have. She sighed dramatically. What a shame. Richard cut into his steak before speaking. I offered him the opportunity of a lifetime. I appreciated it. You threw away. I simply made a different decision. He looked around the table before saying loudly enough for everyone to hear. Sometimes people become so attached to appearing honorable that they never accomplish anything. The table went silent. Emily looked down at her plate. She didn't defend me. Not a word. Her brother chuckled awkwardly. Someone quickly changed the subject. But the damage had been done. On the drive home, neither of us spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, Emily broke the silence. You embarrassed my father. I nearly laughed. He embarrassed me. He was disappointed. He humiliated me in front of your family. He was frustrated because he was trying to help us. I never asked for his help. She turned toward the window. Maybe that's the problem. Over the next few months, something changed between us. Not overnight. Slowly. Almost invisibly. Emily stopped talking about our future. Instead, she talked about my career and your choices. Every disagreement circled back to that job. Whenever money was tight, she'd say, if only you'd accepted Dad's offer. When our washing machine broke, she sighed, we wouldn't have to worry about this if you hadn't been so stubborn. When friends announced they were buying larger homes, she'd smile politely until we got into the car. Then she'd whisper, that could have been us. The hardest part wasn't the words. It was realizing she had started measuring my worth by a decision I would make the same way 100 times over. One rainy evening, I found her sitting alone in the living room. She was holding our wedding album. For a moment, I thought maybe she wanted to fix things. Instead, she closed it gently and said, almost in a whisper, I don't think we're becoming the people we promised each other we'd be. I felt my heart sink. Deep down, I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready to hear her say it. I don't think we're becoming the people we promised each other we'd be. Those words hung in the room long after Emily said them. I stared at her, hoping she'd tell me she was just frustrated, that she'd had a bad day, that we'd wake up tomorrow and laugh about how close we'd come to saying something we'd regret. Instead, she quietly closed our wedding album and rested her hands on it. I've been thinking about this for months. My throat tightened. So have I. She looked surprised. You have. I've been trying to figure out how to get us back. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know if there's a way back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows. The clock in the hallway seemed louder than ever. Finally, I asked the question I had been dreading. Are you asking for a divorce? Emily lowered her eyes. Yes. I wish I could tell you I fought. I wish I could say I gave a passionate speech about love conquering all. I wish I begged her to stay. I did none of those things. Not because I didn't love her. Because I had spent the last year realizing something painful. You can't compete with an idea that someone else has already accepted. Emily no longer believed she was leaving a good man. She believed she was escaping a man who lacked ambition. Anything I said would only sound like another excuse. So I asked one question. Is this really what you want? She nodded. I think it's what's best for both of us. Those words hurt more than the divorce itself. Because she actually believed them. The next morning, she packed a suitcase. Not everything. Just enough to stay at her parents' house. She paused at the front door. For a second, I thought she might turn around. Instead, she said quietly, I hope someday you understand why I have to do this. I answered with the only truth I knew. I understand why you think you have to. She frowned. What does that mean? It means I don't think this is what your heart wants. She shook her head. My heart wants a future. Then she walked away. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the empty house. It was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. News of our separation spread quickly. Her family rallied around her. According to them, Emily had finally stopped settling. Richard didn't hide his opinion. He'll realize one day that principles don't pay bills. Friends took sides. Some stopped calling me altogether. Others tried to stay neutral. One evening, my best friend, Ryan, came over with pizza and a six-pack. He looked around the silent house. I hate this. So do I. He hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you tell Emily exactly what bothered you about her father's company? I looked down at my hands. Because I didn't have proof. So, I wasn't going to accuse her father based on a feeling. Ryan sighed. Maybe she would have believed you. Maybe. But if I was wrong. I shook my head. I would have destroyed her relationship with her family for nothing. Ryan stared at me for several seconds. Then he quietly muttered, "You're a better man than most." I didn't feel like one. I felt like a husband who had failed. 3 months later, we sat across from each other in a lawyer's office. The papers were neatly stacked. Everything had already been agreed upon. Emily wanted a clean divorce. No fighting. No drama. No endless court hearings. We didn't have children. The house would be sold. The savings divided equally. It was all painfully simple. When the lawyer slid the final documents across the table, Emily reached for the pen immediately. Then she looked at me. You can still change your mind. I almost smiled. About the divorce? No. About everything. There it was again. The job. The offer. The decision she believed had ruined our marriage. My answer hasn't changed. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face. She signed. Then I signed. Just like that. 7 years together became a stack of legal papers. As we walked toward the parking lot, I called her name. Emily. She turned. I reached into my briefcase and handed her a sealed envelope. What's this? A letter. She looked confused. Read it. Now. I shook my head. No. When? When you genuinely want to understand why I couldn't become the man everyone wanted me to be. She frowned. What does that mean? It'll make sense someday. She looked at the envelope, then back at me. I don't need a letter, Ethan. I know. She slipped it into her purse anyway. I watched her drive away. I didn't know then that she would never open that envelope. Not for 7 years. The weeks after the divorce were brutal. The house sold faster than I expected. Watching strangers inspect the rooms where we'd built our life together felt like attending my own funeral. One couple stood in the kitchen discussing renovation ideas. This wall has to go. Another said, we'll tear out these old cabinets. I wanted to tell them, those cabinets were where Emily and I danced while waiting for pasta to boil. That scratch on the floor happened when we dropped our first Christmas tree. Those walls had heard our laughter, our dreams, our apologies. But to them, it was just another house. I handed over the keys and walked away without looking back. For the next year, I rented a tiny apartment above a family-owned hardware store. It wasn't glamorous. The pipes rattled. The windows leaked cold air in winter. But for the first time in a long while, no one expected me to be anything other than myself. I buried myself in work. I took evening classes in operations management and business ethics. On weekends, I volunteered with a nonprofit that helped struggling small manufacturers stay afloat. Not because I was trying to prove anything, because helping people reminded me that success wasn't measured by a paycheck. It was measured by whether you could sleep peacefully at night. Little by little, the pain stopped controlling every morning. Emily's absence never disappeared, but it no longer defined me. What I didn't know was that while I was quietly rebuilding my life from the ground up, Emily was living the future she'd chosen. At first, it looked exactly like the dream she'd always wanted. A luxury apartment, a prestigious job arranged through her father's connections, invitations to exclusive events, designer clothes, a life that looked perfect in photographs. But appearances have a way of hiding cracks. And somewhere beneath the polished surface of the Harrison family's success, the first crack had already begun to spread. Neither of us knew it yet. But the truth behind the job I refused was getting closer to the light. And when it finally emerged, it wouldn't just change Emily's life. It would destroy everything she believed about the man she had left. People often assume that the hardest part of divorce is learning to live without the person you loved. They're wrong. The hardest part is waking up one day and realizing life keeps moving anyway. The sun still rises. Bills still arrive. People still laugh. The world doesn't stop just because your heart did. It had been almost 2 years since the divorce when I finally stopped checking my phone every morning, half expecting a message from Emily. By then, I had accepted something I never wanted to believe. She wasn't coming back. So I stopped living as though she might. The nonprofit I volunteered with offered me a full-time position as director of operations. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was honest work. We help struggling family-owned manufacturers improve efficiency, avoid layoffs, and keep people employed. Every company we saved meant dozens of families kept food on their tables. For the first time in years, I felt like my work mattered. One afternoon, an older factory owner named Walter shook my hand after we'd helped him avoid bankruptcy. He looked me in the eye and said, "I've met plenty of smart businessmen." He smiled, but not many good men. I thanked him, but his words stayed with me. For years, I'd measured myself against Richard Harrison's definition of success. Now, I was beginning to understand my father's. Meanwhile, Emily's life looked flawless from the outside. She had become vice president of marketing at one of Columbus's fastest-growing real estate firms, a position her father's network had helped her secure. She moved into a luxury condominium overlooking the river. Her social media filled with elegant dinners, charity galas, business conferences, and vacations that looked like magazine covers. Whenever an old mutual friend mentioned her, the conversation usually ended the same way. "Looks like she's doing really well." I always smiled politely. "I hope she is." And I meant it. Despite everything that had happened, I never wanted her to suffer. One Saturday afternoon, I ran into Lisa Monroe at a grocery store. Lisa had been Emily's closest friend since college. She froze when she saw me. "Ethan." "Hi, Lisa." For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she sighed. "You look different." "I've got more gray hair." She laughed. "No, you look lighter." I smiled. I finally learned how to sleep again. Her smile faded. I wish Emily could say the same. That caught me off guard. I thought she was happy. Lisa hesitated. That's what she wants everyone to believe. Before I could ask another question, she looked at her watch. "I've already said too much." She reached for her shopping cart. Then she stopped. "Ethan." "Yeah." "She talks about you more than you'd think." My heart skipped. "What does she say?" Lisa looked down. "Mostly that she wishes things hadn't ended the way they did." Then she walked away. I stood in the frozen food aisle for several minutes, staring at nothing. It was the first crack I'd heard in the perfect life everyone believed Emily was living. A few months later, another crack appeared. This time, everyone saw it. Richard Harrison's construction company abruptly canceled a major expansion project. Rumors spread across the local business community. Cash flow problems, delayed payments, disputes with investors. Nothing was confirmed, but the whispers grew louder. Ryan called me one evening. "You hearing this?" "I've heard rumors." He lowered his voice. "My company bid against Harrison Construction last month." "So, they're acting desperate." I stayed quiet. Ryan continued. "I don't know what's happening over there, but something's wrong." I thought back to the contract Richard had offered me years earlier. For the first time since the divorce, a chill ran down my spine. Emily still defended her father publicly. Whenever someone questioned the company, she dismissed it as jealousy. "He built that business from nothing. He knows what he's doing. The rumors are ridiculous." She believed every word, because she had no reason not to. Richard had always been larger than life in her eyes. Confident, successful, untouchable. She never imagined he could be hiding anything. Then came the night everything started to unravel. Emily attended one of her father's annual fundraising dinners. Business leaders, investors, politicians, and local media filled the ballroom. Richard stood at the podium, smiling as he thanked everyone for their support. Halfway through his speech, two men in dark suits entered through the main doors. They weren't guests. They walked directly toward the stage. The room fell silent. One of them quietly showed Richard an identification badge. No one could hear what was said, but everyone watched the color drain from Richard's face. He nodded once, set down the microphone, and walked off the stage with them. No applause, no explanation, just silence. Emily sat frozen in her chair. Someone whispered behind her, "Federal investigators." Another voice said, "I knew something wasn't right." Phones came out immediately. People began leaving the ballroom. Within 24 hours, every local news station was reporting the same story. Harrison Construction was under investigation for years of fraudulent accounting, concealed financial losses, and misleading investors. Richard denied every allegation, but investigators had already seized company records. Emily watched the reports in disbelief. "No," she whispered to herself. "No, my dad wouldn't." For the first time in her life, certainty abandoned her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying one memory: the lunch, the job offer, my refusal, the way I'd said, "I won't sign something I don't fully trust." Back then, she'd heard arrogance. Now, she heard fear. Not fear of hard work. Fear of becoming part of something wrong. She suddenly realized something that made her stomach turn. Ethan had never accused my father. He had simply refused to tie his name to a business he couldn't trust. She sat on the edge of her bed until sunrise. One question echoed over and over in her mind. What if he had been right all along? And buried in the back of her closet, inside an old leather handbag she hadn't used in years, was a sealed envelope covered in a thin layer of dust. It was the letter I had handed her on the day our divorce became final. She had never opened it. In 7 years. Not once. She picked it up with trembling hands. The seal was still unbroken. Her name, written in my handwriting, stared back at her. Emily. For the first time since our divorce. She was finally ready to learn why I had said no. Emily held the envelope for nearly an hour before opening it. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. The edges were worn from being carried from one purse to another, one closet to another, through apartments and houses, never once opened. She traced her finger over my handwriting. Then, with trembling hands, she broke the seal. Inside was a 4-page letter. At the top, I'd written only one sentence. "If you're reading this, it means you finally wanted to understand me, not change me." A tear landed on the paper before she could read another word. "Emily, if this letter ever reaches your heart, our marriage is already over." That thought hurts more than I know how to describe. I'm not writing to convince you to come back. Love that has to be argued for isn't really love anymore. I'm writing because I never wanted you to believe I refused your father's offer out of pride. You deserve the truth, even if I couldn't prove it at the time. Emily's breathing became uneven. She kept reading. "The day your father offered me the position, I wanted to say yes. Not because of the money, because I imagined your smile when I came home and told you we'd finally have everything we dreamed about. I imagined paying off the house. I imagined taking you to Italy. I imagined never seeing you worry about bills again. I wanted that life with you." Emily covered her mouth. For years, she'd convinced herself I'd never wanted those dreams. Now she was discovering that I had wanted them just as much as she did, just not at any cost. The letter continued. But there was something in that contract I couldn't ignore. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe it wasn't. The problem wasn't whether your father was guilty. The problem was that the contract required me to sign documents I couldn't honestly verify. Your father asked for trust. My conscience asked for proof. I chose my conscience. Emily began crying openly, not because the words were dramatic, because they were so painfully simple. She kept reading. "I never told you all of this because I refused to accuse your father without evidence. Imagine if I had been wrong. I would have destroyed your relationship with your family forever. You would have had to choose between us. I loved you too much to put you in that position." Emily whispered through tears. "Oh, Ethan." She turned the page. Near the bottom was the paragraph that shattered what remained of her certainty. "If you're leaving because you believe I'm afraid of success, then nothing I say today will change your mind. But I hope that someday you'll understand the difference between refusing opportunity and refusing to compromise your character. If that day ever comes, don't punish yourself. Just promise me one thing. Raise your children, whether they're mine or someone else's, to believe that integrity is worth more than admiration. Because admiration disappears the moment people stop benefiting from you. Character remains after everyone else walks away." Emily couldn't continue. She lowered the letter into her lap and sobbed harder than she had on the day the divorce became final. For 7 years, she told herself a story. That Ethan had chosen stubbornness over their future. Now she realized something unbearable. He had chosen principles to protect both of them. And she had walked away because she mistook integrity for weakness. Over the next several weeks, investigators released more details. Richard Harrison hadn't simply made poor business decisions. According to court filings, senior executives had approved misleading financial statements for years, helping conceal mounting losses from lenders and investors. Several former executives were named in the investigation. Some claimed they had signed documents without fully reviewing them because they trusted Richard's instructions. Emily felt sick every time she read another article. One evening, she spread my letter beside the news reports on her dining table. She stared at the 2 piles of paper. One represented the truth I tried to live by. The other represented the life she'd chosen instead. For the first time, she asked herself the question she'd avoided for 7 years. What would have happened if Ethan had accepted the job? The answer came almost immediately. His signature could have been on those documents. His name could have been in those investigations. His reputation, his freedom, everything he believed in, might have been destroyed. She buried her face in her hands. "My God," she whispered. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting us. And in that moment, the full weight of her decision finally crashed down on her. She hadn't left a man without ambition. She had left the one man who refused to sell his soul. That night, Emily drove past the old neighborhood where we'd once lived. The maple tree still stood in front of the house, now much taller than before. A young couple's bicycles rested on the porch. Children's chalk drawings covered the driveway. Life had moved on, just as mine had. She sat across the street for nearly 20 minutes, remembering Saturday mornings with coffee on the porch, planting flowers together, dreaming about children who never came. She finally understood something that no amount of success could erase. She hadn't lost a house. She hadn't lost a marriage. She had lost the safest place her heart had ever known. And for the first time in 7 long years, she realized the regret she carried wasn't temporary. It was something she would have to live with for the rest of her life. 7 years had changed me, not in the dramatic, movie-like way people imagine. I hadn't become a billionaire. I hadn't bought a mansion just to prove anyone wrong. Life doesn't usually reward people that way. Instead, it rewarded me quietly. 3 years after the divorce, I started a consulting firm that helped family-owned manufacturers improve operations without sacrificing ethics or laying off workers unnecessarily. It grew slowly. Every new client came through referrals. Every contract was earned. By the 7th year, we employed nearly 40 people. We weren't the biggest firm in Ohio, but we had something I valued more than impressive headlines. People trusted us. That trust became the foundation of everything I'd rebuilt. I also met someone unexpected, not through a dating app, not at a fancy event. Her name was Grace Mitchell, and she was the executive director of a nonprofit we partnered with. She'd lost her husband to cancer years earlier. She understood grief. I understood loss. Neither of us was looking to replace the past. We simply enjoyed each other's company. For almost 2 years, We remained friends before either of us admitted there might be something more. She never asked me to become someone else. She never measured my value by my salary, my title, or the neighborhood where I lived. She simply asked one question the first time we had dinner together. "Are you a man whose word means something?" I smiled. "I try to be." She nodded. "That's enough for me." For the first time since my divorce, I believed love could feel peaceful again. Meanwhile, Emily's world was collapsing. Her father's company filed for bankruptcy. Several executives accepted plea agreements. Richard insisted he had done nothing wrong, but the evidence continued to mount. The Harrison family name, once associated with prestige, became a cautionary tale in local business circles. Friends who once crowded around their dinner table stopped calling. Invitations disappeared. The people who admired success disappeared the moment the success was gone. Exactly as I'd written in my letter. Emily read those words over and over. Each time, they hurt more. One afternoon, Lisa finally said what everyone else had been thinking. "You should talk to him." Emily stared into her coffee. What would I even say? The truth. I destroyed our marriage. You believed the wrong people. I still chose them. Lisa reached across the table. "Then stop asking whether you deserve forgiveness." Emily looked up. "Ask whether he deserves the apology." A week later, my receptionist knocked on my office door. "There's someone here asking for you." "Who?" "Emily Harrison." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. 7 years. Not a phone call. Not a message. Nothing. I stood slowly. "I'll see her." She was sitting in the reception area, holding the same envelope. The letter. When she saw me, she stood. Neither of us moved for several seconds. Time had changed us both. There were more lines around her eyes. A little gray in my hair. But I recognized the sadness immediately. It was the same sadness I'd carried years earlier. "I read it," she whispered. "I figured you must have." "I'm sorry." I nodded once. "I know." Tears filled her eyes. "No, you don't understand. I am so unbelievably sorry. You tried to protect me. You protected my relationship with my father. You protected your integrity. And I—" Her voice broke. "I called you selfish. I let the silence sit between us. Not to punish her. Because some pain deserves to be acknowledged before it's answered." Finally, I spoke. "I was angry for a long time." She lowered her head. "I know, but eventually." I smiled sadly. "I stopped being angry." She looked up hopefully. "I started wishing you'd find peace." That sentence broke her completely. She covered her face and cried. "I'm the one who should have been protecting us. I failed you." "No," I said quietly. "We failed each other." She looked confused. "You should have trusted me." I paused. "But I should have explained myself better. I was trying to protect your relationship with your father." "I know." But silence gave everyone else room to write their own version of who I was. She nodded through tears. "I believe their version." "I know." After a long silence, Emily asked the question she'd carried for years. "Is there any chance?" She couldn't finish. I understood anyway. I looked down at the simple silver ring on my right hand. It wasn't a wedding ring. It was a ring my father had worn every day of his life. After he passed away, I started wearing it. I smiled gently. "I've met someone." Emily closed her eyes. "I thought maybe you had." "She's kind." "I'm happy." The words sounded fragile coming from her, but she meant them. "I hope she knows what kind of man she has." I laughed softly. "She reminds me every day." Emily wiped away another tear. "I wish I'd done that." Before leaving, she reached into her purse. She handed me the letter. "I think this belongs to you." I shook my head. "No, it was always yours." She looked down at it. "I'll keep it." "I think you should." As she reached the door, I called her name one last time. She turned. "I forgive you." Fresh tears rolled down her face. Not tears of relief, tears of understanding. Because forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Sometimes it simply allows two broken people to stop carrying hatred. She smiled through the tears. "Thank you." Then she walked away. This time, neither of us looked back. Epilogue. A year later, Grace and I were married in a small ceremony beside a quiet lake. No luxury ballroom. No headlines. Just family, friends, laughter, and promises built on honesty. Sometimes when I drive past the old neighborhood, I think about the life Emily and I almost had. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude. She taught me that love without trust cannot survive. I taught her that success without integrity is only temporary. Months after our conversation, I received one final letter from Emily. It contained only a single sentence. You were never the man who lacked ambition. You were the man brave enough to refuse the wrong kind of success. I understand that now, and I'll spend the rest of my life wishing I had understood it sooner. I folded the letter, placed it in my desk drawer beside my father's old pocket watch, and quietly closed it. Some stories don't end with two people finding their way back to each other. Some end with something even rarer. The truth arrives too late to save the marriage, but just in time to save the people who survived it. And if there's one lesson I hope you'll carry from my story, it's this. Never judge someone's future by the opportunities they refuse. Sometimes the bravest decision a person can make is walking away from everything the world admires to protect the one thing they can never replace, their character. Sometimes the greatest regrets aren't caused by the choices we make. They're caused by the people we fail to understand until it's too late. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Did Emily deserve forgiveness, or did she realize the truth too late? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories of love, regret, betrayal, and second chances. Until next time, thank you for watching.